Hello and welcome to episode 20 of series 2 of the Engaging Internal Comms podcast. This is the show for employee engagers and internal communicators who like to keep up to date with all that is new in our profession. My name's Craig Smith from the Big Picture People. Well, you wait for milestones to come along and then two come along together. Last episode was our anniversary episode, our first anniversary episode of the show, and this episode is our 50th. So this is the 20th episode in series 2, as you know, because you heard my introduction at the beginning, and because we had 30 episodes in series 1, that by my maths makes us up to 50. So again, we're really pleased that we've made it to that milestone, and I hope you, if you've not already listened to some of our previous shows, you've had a chance to do so. Just a couple of things I want to mention before we get into today's interview. One is I had an email through from someone who asked to remain anonymous, and I think it was a really good point, actually, and something we probably should have made clearer right at the beginning of some of our earlier episodes. And that is, I often make reference to the show notes. So when I'm interviewing our guests, I will often say to them, you know, what have you got anything you'd like to share with us? Have you got anything that you'd like to our listeners to be able to access that kind of helps them to understand a little bit more about what our guests' ideas and any of the work that they've done, and also their LinkedIn details, which we always share. And I always refer to the show notes. And the question was, well, how do I find the show notes? Because I know if you're listening to this on iTunes, you will have some notes there that you can see, but they're not as detailed as the actual show notes that we upload. So if you would like to see the show notes and access the show notes, and we also put hyperlinks in to any of the frameworks that our guests are referring to into them as well. So it's well worth a look. If you go to our website, which is thebigpicturepeople.co.uk, and if you go to the podcast there, now some of you may listen to the podcast through our website already, so you'll already find the show notes. But if you go to the podcast link there, and you will see all of the episodes listed, and they're all exactly the same as the episodes that you're listening to on the platform that you're absorbing the podcast on now, whether that's iTunes or Spotify or Podchaser, however you're listening to the podcast. But if you go to our website, to the podcast link, you will see all of the shows linked listed in a series order, and you will be able to see, if you click on them, there will be a player there, so you can, if you want to listen to it again, you can, but also you'll see all of the show notes and all of the links that I'm referring to. So apologies if I've confused any of you in the past by that, not intentional of course, but you'll find all of the show notes and all of the previous episodes. Now, it's also maybe an easier way to browse through some of the previous episodes that we've put out there, than trying to use your platform, your podcast platform. By all means, carry on listening and subscribing to the show on your podcast platform, because I appreciate that's easier than if you want to get it into your listening stream every week. But if you do want to go back and look at any of the show notes, the website is by far and away the most comprehensive way of doing that. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is you were just in time, if you haven't already signed up for it, on Thursday this week, and apologies if you're listening to this sometime in the future, so that's the 8th of July 2021, we are running another one of our free webinars, and that's at 3 p.m. 1500 hours. That's 3 p.m. UK time. So if you'd like to come along to that, it's a free webinar, and it's called "Helping Your Employees Understand Your Organization's Big Picture." And it's all about the fact that what we often find is that a lot of business leaders, a lot of senior managers have challenges explaining their organization's mission, vision, values to their employees, and that's often because they're quite close to the detail, and it's often a very complex story. But when they can do that effectively, it's a really, really powerful way of improving engagement, alignment across the organization. So in the webinar, we're going to be talking about some of the challenges that sharing the big picture brings to our managers and leaders, but we're also going to be sharing some techniques that you can use to communicate those complex messages in a really engaging way. So if you'd like to sign up for that, go to our website, thebigpicturepeople.co.uk. Again, if you go to the menu tab at the top of the screen there, you see events, if you scroll down to helping your employees understand your organization's big picture, you'll find a link there for more information, and you can book directly from there, or it will take you through to Zoom anyway, where we're hosting the webinar, and you can book up through that. So I think I've talked for more than long enough now. I'm going to let you listen to today's guest. A few weeks ago on episode 17 of Series 2, we interviewed Matthew Mclean, who was telling us all about the value of podcasting as an internal communications channel. And we got some feedback to say that that had landed really well, and that listeners would like to learn more about podcasting as a channel within their organizations. So I reached out, and my interviewee today is another expert in that area, who's going to share with us a structure for how you can create and sustain an internal podcast within your organization. Her organization actually provides clients with a platform that they can use, which is like a kind of an internal iTunes, Spotify, Netflix type environment where employees can consume not only audio but also video as well. But it's primarily audio that we're going to be focusing on today. So this is going to go into the area in a bit more depth, and the interviewee is going to share with us a kind of nice structure for thinking around what are the kind of main elements that you need to be thinking about if you're going to launch, grow and sustain podcasting as one of your internal communication channels. And again, this is, as I say, this has been born out of feedback from our listeners. So if there's any other areas like this that you'd like us to cover on the show, then please get in touch with us so we can record more episodes with relevant interviewees for you. So I hope you like today's interview and find it useful. My interviewee today is Jen Gragono. Jen is founder and chief executive officer of UStudio Inc. UStudio deliver a new generation of media technologies for clients, transforming their training and communications using podcasts, on-demand video, and live streaming. Jen's early work in digital media has been recognized through industry awards and has been noted in business publications such as the New York Times, Fortune, and the Wall Street Journal. Good day, Jen. How are you?
Hi, how are you doing, Craig? I'm well. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. I nearly said good afternoon there, but it's your morning at the moment, because I believe you're in Austin, Texas, I believe.
That's correct. It is 9 a.m. or a bit past today.
9 a.m. and we're 6 hours different. So fantastic. So I mentioned a little bit about UStudio. Could you just give us a little bit of an overview? I've said there you do podcasting, digital, on-demand video, live streaming. What? Tell us a little bit more about UStudio and the sort of work that you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, we've got a platform that we built to help businesses adopt media. It's our view that businesses over time look more and more like media organizations in terms of communications, and using video and audio strategically for internal comms or training, HR, sales enablement, etc., is something that we believe is important and meaningful in terms of having an effect on bottom line and the ability for workforces to just be aligned with their organizations. So that's what our platform does. And we have an application that feels a lot like a Netflix experience for the workforce. And it's been a lot of fun actually helping big companies and medium-sized companies even adopt this and roll it out to their users, start communicating in sort of a show episode format, if you will.
Yeah. Excellent. Fantastic. Yeah. And we met on LinkedIn, and we had a really interesting conversation about what you've just been talking about there. And one of the areas, we talked about it a few weeks ago in one of the interviews on the show with Matthew Mclean, but this idea of using podcasts and particularly audio. So this is obviously we're recording this for our podcast. So I'm really interested in looking into this a little bit further with you. And I know you've got a really nice way of thinking about how to structure audio and podcasting internally, and I really like your idea of this kind of sort of internal Netflix account for organizations and for their employees. But it's an area we talked about a few weeks ago. But I mean, what I'd really like to just get your take on Jen is why is podcasting a great channel for internal communicators to be thinking about, for as audio as a way of communicating with their employees?
Well, I think the voice was lost for years in emails and PDFs and PowerPoints. And we have forgotten in some cases that our voice carries so much more meaning. If you go back to the Albert Moravian study, I think it's 1960s, it's 500% more effective in terms of conveying meaning. And so if you have a tool like that, and you're not using it, and you're in a role where communications and training, which is almost every role inside of a company to some degree, is critical, then you're really not taking advantage of what I think is one of the most important ways for us to get a message across, ensure it's heard and retained. And so I believe strongly that the power of voice, which we're starting to see now in new technologies like Clubhouse, and certainly during the pandemic, we saw it with Zoom and all of the remote conferencing, right, that we were subjected to, but now appreciate on many levels. I think those tools are sort of giving everyone pause and thinking of forcing us really to think through, how do I take advantage of those capabilities and those technologies inside of a company, and that's that's really the lion's share of our thinking. And actually, let me restate that. That's really at the cornerstone of a lot of the work we do with businesses, helping them really embrace voice and audio, and then of course the format. The format that's most accepted today, the thing you do, every couple of weeks and release, is podcasting. And it's just such a simple way to organize information. This concept of a show and an episode, right, a series, is where I click on a box and I see a list of episodes or topics that I can explore. It's just a really nice way for people to receive a message. And when the studies that we've looked at, the research we've done, the surveying we've done with our own customers suggests that it is by far the preferred mode for workers and employees. And of course, not to say nothing of the folks who have these massive workforces that don't even have email addresses, right? If you work at McDonald's or maybe inside the Lego store, in a mall, you don't get an email address with the company name, but everybody has a phone.
Yeah.
And so if you can take advantage of that, right, this massive distribution of mobile phones, and then this consumer habit that everybody has around Netflix and podcasting, then you've got a wonderful opportunity to use your voice to convey important messages and trainings, et cetera.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, I mean, it's sort of the confluence of a lot of the rise of a lot of technologies and realizations that have really come to bear over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously with the likes of Spotify and also Apple finally waking up and realizing the golden egg that they're sitting on a few weeks ago with podcasting as it's starting. I think I think it was still at the early stages of this phenomena, which it seems like it's been around for a long time, but I still think there's a huge amount of potential in it. But I mean, I think the thing for me about podcasting or audio in general is the flexibility of it and the ability to multitask, not in a way that's distracting, but you can, while you're commuting, while you're at the gym, while you're in the car, things that video is a great medium, but you can't. Well, you can watch a video while you're driving, but it's not to be advised, and not while you're running or on your bike either. So I think, and the intimacy that I think audio has as well. You're literally in someone's head, and you get a lot longer than you do with other platforms. Although, I think it's about using it for its strengths.
No question. We're just picking up so much more data, right? Yeah. If I'm listening to your voice, if you read a sentence and then you hear that same sentence with the inflections and tone, you're just picking up so much more information.
Yeah.
And so, but I agree wholeheartedly on the multitasking. At first with the pandemic, we thought, well, not as many people will be commuting. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But we did have far more use of our web application. We offer both web and mobile, as most apps, in the podcast world do. And we did see a flip. So it was about 70-30 mobile. During the heavy, early pandemic months, it flipped to about 70% desktop app. But even then, I can have audio going in the background while I'm working.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to your point, the without forcing someone to actually watch a video. Now, we do offer video podcasts too,
Yeah.
right? There are some companies that do that, but and take advantage of that added sight piece, especially if it's a complicated topic or you need to show a diagram or it's something that just a voice isn't able to convey the full message. You need something visual, but for the most part, I couldn't agree more. It's also for an executive and for many leaders inside of corporations. It's just less daunting, right? They're used to doing conference calls. They're used to talking to investors every quarter. They're not necessarily interested in being in front of a camera. And that's, I think maybe over time, the younger generation changes that. And maybe there's a little bit more comfort with it, but the bar is just lower on the creation front and it's far lower on the consumption front.
Yeah.
And so, those two pieces coming together really made a huge difference, I think, in its adoption.
Yeah. Well, that takes us nicely into what I want to talk to you now about, which is sort of the bulk of the rest of this conversation, which is around, what do we need to do if we're looking to set up and develop an internal podcast or audio channel? What are some of the things we need to do? And you've got a fantastic resource, which we're going to put in the show notes, which is the 6 Ps of podcasting, a quick and easy startup guide for the corporate podcaster. So it's that I'd like to kind of explore with you in a little bit more detail and to kind of get your insights with Jen, and it's the 6 Ps. So do you want, rather than me reading out, it's your 6 Ps. Do you want to run through the 6 Ps just for the listener, and then we can go into them in a little bit more detail?
Sure, I'm happy to. So it's people, programming, publishing, production. Actually, we flip those typically.
Yeah.
Production, publishing, promotion, and performance, which is really about measurement.
Okay, fantastic. So let's start at the top then. So let's talk a little bit about people. So when you talk about people, what do we need to be thinking about if we're either, well, probably we're looking at this from the angle of someone who's looking at maybe thinking of starting a corporate internal podcast. What is the people element, and what do we need to be thinking about there?
Yeah, so even, whether you're just getting started or even if you're someone who's been doing podcasting for a while, we always recommend that you look at the people P closely from a couple of different angles. The first is, who's the team that's actually going to produce the podcast? What do you need? Do you need somebody who is writing out an editorial calendar? Do you need someone who is actually doing the recording? Are you looking for an interviewer, right? Somebody who's a host, a show host? So really gathering and assembling internally the list of folks you need to actually record and publish a podcast. The second angle we ask folks to look at is the executive angle, right? Who are the executives inside of your company that you can get on board early? You can make a lot more progress when you're trying something new when you have a team of people who are behind you and supporting you and evangelizing the very thing that you're trying to get off the ground. So we offer some tips and tools around building sort of an internal advisory group. And then the second advisory group on the people front is the listeners. So finding something like 10 to 15 folks inside of your organization who really represent the audience, right? Who can give you feedback on the content, who can help you with understanding how it's being received. We provide all sorts of data, and we'll get to that in the performance P. But I think there's never a substitute to just listening to people and getting some insights before you get going. So it's those three facets, right? The folks you need to pull it off, and sometimes that includes your tech team, right? Somebody on the IT front, and then we look at an executive advisory group, and then an audience advisory group. So that's the people part.
Yeah, and I've got a nice Venn diagram in your guide that sort of shows how those they interface with each other. So it's definitely worth downloading and have a look at that. I like the way you visualize that.
Sometimes. Thank you. Sometimes we just forget that there's all sorts of technology available to us, but ultimately the people make it work, and can't forget about the people. So the second part is programming. And when we talk about programming, I always think about, what did a TV programmer back in the day have to think about? And most people don't realize there were all sorts of strategies back before we had time shifting and place shifting and on-demand TV or radio, right? We had everything was linear and everything was time boxed, and so the strategies for what went during what time block was. Those strategies were very sophisticated, and we have to really think about not so much repeating the those exact strategies, but what are the sophisticated techniques that we can use on the programming front in this new medium, right? It is on demand. So we're not thinking about, time boxing and keeping, it's not like live, right? I mean, I suppose you could do live podcasts. We offer that, but most companies are looking at this from an on-demand content perspective. So, how many shows do you want to offer? How many episodes do you need? Are you going to put the episodes out every week? Or are you going to put them out every day? Some people are starting to take advantage of the New York Times Daily. I don't know if you're familiar with that daily podcast, and sort of copying that format for their company. Some folks are looking at BBC or NPR podcasts and looking at the genre and the format and trying to emulate that. So programming is really about what are the shows, what are the episodes, who are the people that you're targeting. Do you have a channel of your UK workers, and maybe they get different content? Certainly, maybe your workers in Spain are getting the Spanish spoken content. So you want to make sure that you're really thinking about it in terms of audience channels or audience groups, shows and episodes. How many, how long, is there music? What's the format? If you are emulating some existing public podcast, which I think is a great idea, which one is it? So we often will suggest that folks write a brief, right? And that's the way, a programming brief that sort of lists and describes each of the shows and their purpose and the episode formats, et cetera. And that's good old fashioned planning, right? Organizing and planning.
And scheduling and, of course, and thinking about the content. And I guess scheduling and thinking ahead about the kind of content that you're going to need in order to fill that schedule as well, which I know from even running a modest podcast like mine, which is, quite simple, I guess, compared with some of the kind of complex podcasts your clients are using is being ahead of yourself by a few weeks makes all the difference. So, and knowing, during the holiday times, maybe you take a break, certain weeks because you don't have as much listenership available. Thinking about all of the consistency aspects, right? What am I going to do the same every time? What am I going to change up? And we tend to underestimate, I think, the value of expectation setting and consistency, especially in a medium like this, where folks, you want people to think about joining or following, subscribing in the old days to a piece of content, and then getting what they expect every single time will increase that engagement. So I'd say programming. Then moving people
on to
programming now. Production.
Production is can be very simple, as you know. It can also be very, very sophisticated. So this is a P that we consult on around choosing and organizing the actual recording aspect, right? Do you need this? Do you want this to be very high-end recording with high-end editing? We talked a little bit about music. Is there an intro or an outro? Is the music original music? Or are you using something from a music library that maybe has a royalty-free license? Those are all considerations. And the production piece, I think, is fairly straightforward. It used to be a lot harder. Of course, we all have a wonderful recorder in the palm of our hands now. And every laptop has got the ability to do wonderful recording. And you've got tools like Squadcast and Zencaster, which are phenomenal. And we're using one of them now. So you really do have nowadays an unbelievable richness of tool choices. And I think this is just getting better and better. We as lay people, if you will, are and business users are going to be able to make podcasts just so simply and so turnkeyable, if that's a word, as the BBCs of the world, right? And that's what it's trending towards. We never believed we could have a camera as powerful as we do built into the iPhone. And so we're just, the tooling is there, and it's just knowing what's available and knowing what you want, right? Do you want to produce it yourselves? Do you want to have your executives produce their own? Do you want to have a firm doing it for you? And we've got all sorts of partners that we'll pull in if somebody wants to use a firm. But it's an exercise to really determine how the production gets done and the pipeline for editing, et cetera. And then the next one, of course, is publishing. And that's what is the publishing schedule, right? Where are you publishing it? In a world of internal and workforce podcasting, these are obviously very secure tools, and these are not being put out on the Spotifys of the world. But the tool that you have internally to upload and set a schedule and publish is important. And making sure that you've got a plan around how that's going to work is something that we obviously consult with our customers about. And moving, of course, publishing for us is typically, here's how you use the Studio platform to do it.
Yeah.
Here's how you get it in the app. But then moving on from there is promotion.
And just before we move on, sorry, Jen, just before we move on to that. So
sure.
I think it's really interesting to understand, because for publishing, obviously for external podcasts, as you say, it's like, you use Libsyn or something like that, which you link to your website, and then obviously is your hosting for that. Your platform is used for your clients, so it's a secure. And again, it's not in the public domain. It's a secure platform that you're using there that only you have to have access to. Yeah. Okay.
That's right. So effectively, it's just an app. So if you were to download Spotify, you have to put your Spotify credentials in to get access to your library and your content. It's the same thing. You download Studio from Apple.
Yeah.
And once you download it, you put your credentials in. If you don't have an account, you sign up for an account. Sure. But it's all very secure and it's authenticated. And so we know exactly who's logging in for which company, and those companies, those organizations have a very sophisticated readout of the individual named users and login, et cetera, and how much consumption and what was consumed.
Yeah.
And so it is very much a private Spotify or private, think about an Apple podcast app.
Yeah.
The application experience is very simple. The back end for hosting and uploading is very simple. We also do give away free external podcast hosting. So for any of our customers, Fidelity is one that comes to mind. They use us also to just put an RSS feed up and put their podcast on Spotify and Apple and index it across all of the the popular consumer podcast services. But for us, that's a very easy. It's RSS hosting. It's designed to be open.
Yeah. And
it's just a matter of making sure that the show title and description and the thumbnail all adheres to the the requirements of those platforms. And that's what our system does. It just handles that for you. So like a Libsyn, to your point. On the other side, but you're absolutely right. It's, it's a private app. It's a private app experience. And it's got, your company's logo on it, et cetera. Yeah.
And does that have the facility to put show notes and searchable content? That's, okay, great.
Absolutely. It looks and feels like, if you could imagine, a mashup of Apple Podcast and Spotify and Stitcher and Audible.
Yeah.
We've really taken kind of the best of those feature sets and rolled them into what we think is a great corporate experience. And without deviating much, right? We try to keep it very consistent with, this is what users expect from a Spotify. So this is how we're going to handle playlists, for example. We're working on a feature with playlists. I think Spotify's got that really well handled, slightly better than, Apple and some of the others. And that's what we do, but there are other features like sleep timer. We did not build the sleep timer in because we just don't think a lot of corporate users are going to be going to bed with their corporate podcast. Maybe
who
one
knows?
day. But
might have quite a soporific effect. Who knows?
That's right. But there are other features we look at that you don't have in the consumer podcast app. Like, wouldn't it be nice to be able to add a podcast to your work schedule? Right. So I know that during this time I'm going to listen to this podcast. So add to my calendar. Not something we see in the consumer apps, but something that I think is very, very useful for business. Bookmarking and to your point, show notes and dog earing content is great for corporate use as well, because there's a lot of content, especially training content, you want to come back to, right? And that's why the playlist concept is so important. Slightly more emphasis on that, I think, than some of the consumers. So maybe more like an Audible, which I think has just fantastic bookmarking capabilities. I'm not going to get on my soapbox, but the way that iTunes sometimes just really
annoys me sometimes. I mean, I use it on my watch because I run, and I used to usually listen to most of my podcasts when I'm out running, and having it on my watch is brilliant. But the interface is just so clunky. It's so frustrating. It's such a lost opportunity. But so I think it's a really important part of the process is to have a clean interface that's intuitive and allows people to get where they want to quickly, because it can be a barrier to I think uptake as well, which maybe we'll talk about in a moment. So anyway, so I cut you off. You were going to talk about promotion, and I think
no, all good. Thank you. So promotion is it's often overlooked, but super important, right? If I roll a new podcast out to my company and nobody knows it exists, and probably not going to get a lot of listeners or users. And so that's an area that we spend a lot of time really trying to understand the company we're working with and what is their culture, right? How are new things rolled out? In the old days, there were companies that would put flyers on the back of bathroom stalls. With people working from home, that would not be very effective. But for a company, again, like a McDonald's or Lego, where they don't have email addresses, how do you inform them, right? Where do they get their paycheck? That's a big one, right? Paychecks are something that every company distributes, and how do they distribute it? How do you attach new information about the company and new content that they may need to listen to? How do you encourage people to download the app? And we've seen various things work really well. So some companies give away free AirPods for the first 1,000 downloaders or the first 100 downloaders. If it's a massive company, maybe more. But there are loyalty programs. If you listen to certain amounts of content every month, maybe you're enrolled in some sort of loyalty program, or you get access to a Starbucks card or what have you. And those are just fun tips and tools that you can use to make people aware of the content and encourage listenership. So sort of in the early parts of rolling out a podcast program, you want to make sure that you're just taking advantage of all of the ways that you might get new information and new programs rolled out inside your company. We've had people use their CEO to announce it. We've had people use their CEO to talk about their favorite episode and to communicate that. So, selling the unknown through the known, selling ideas and concepts and newness from or through the people in your company you trust. So there are a number of ways to do this. We even have ads, little embeddable ads for each episode that we allow our administrators to grab from our system. And then they can embed that in the corporate intranet or the learning management system. Again, whatever the well-trafficked technology is. Email is the obvious one. Email notifications. So you can imagine there are any number of ways that you can promote your podcast program, but doing it is really important.
Yeah.
Right. Not just talking about
consistency. Yeah. And have you found any? I remember listening to, when I first started my podcast, I used to listen to a lot of podcasts about podcasting, which sounds really sort of kind of circular. But and I remember I listened to one guy talking about how his audience were kind of kind of plumbers, guys on the road doing kind of maintenance work, who aren't a typical group who you would probably think would listen to podcasts. Have you found a way of introducing people? Because it's very easy for us to kind of wax lyrical about how brilliant podcasting is because we like podcasts. But I guess there are some people. My wife, for example, never listens to podcasts, and I'm always going on about podcasts and how great they are, and she goes, "No, they just don't work for me." How do you help organizations where maybe there are pockets or groups of people who just they don't understand podcasting? It's just they've heard about it, but they've never tried it. Have you found any ways that work with kind of new people who are completely new to podcasting as a concept?
Well, I think that's it. It's just, you're just getting them to try it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you said it. And so, that's the best, right? The best opportunity is to have someone who's never in the consumer world used, listen to a podcast or even used an app like a Netflix. Getting them to try it is key. And, there are a number of companies that we work with that have, to your point, pockets of people who fall into maybe an older demographic. I was talking to one of my customers last week, and they've got a big surgical medical device. And a lot of their salespeople have been with them for years and years, and they're just sort of set in their ways, and how they get information about, the new technologies and the new device, changes coming out is just what we might consider a little bit archaic, right? That they're just not the digital warriors that you might imagine a salesperson that works for Salesforce.com is. And so we talk a lot with them and other customers about ways of just getting people to try it. And that's where the enticing them with rewards and opportunities. And, it's sort of the tried and true. If you do this, you will get, or this was what will happen to you. But also just having someone who looks and acts like them standing up and saying, hey, I tried it and it was amazing. My sales, success went up 50% because I now understand more about the products I'm selling.
Yeah.
Whatever the value proposition is, right? But getting someone who looks and functions in the same role is I think an interesting approach. But it's like anything, it's evolution.
Yeah.
And it won't work for everyone. And you will still have people who prefer reading because maybe, like your wife, she may be just way more efficient at it.
Yeah.
She may feel that listening is more work. And I think she is probably the minority. If you look at the research, right? Most of us are sort of wired for voice and visual. And those of us who are phenomenal readers and writers are not necessarily, in the mass numbers, and yet they still exist.
Yeah.
We still exist. There are times when I prefer to just read something quickly.
Sure.
But there's no question I can get more meaning if I'm listening to your voice.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key.
I suppose the enduring element of it is that, we survived with, we used the radio, had the popularity of radio prior to, the kind of TV's mass uplift was, a lot of, so I guess it's just a different way. It's just reframing it as a sort of an on-demand radio service, which we, we've proven is a very successful way of communicating for quite a number of decades.
Well,
So,
even before that, think of oral history.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Generations were handed oral histories down, and sometimes we forget. There's a great TED talk about how the printing press really set us back in many ways.
Yeah.
Because we created this culture or this requirement to be really good at something that wasn't necessarily natural.
Yes.
The reading and the writing piece, right? And then of course schools went reading and writing focused, and if you weren't a great reader and writer, you were labeled probably ADD or creative. You were stuck in the corner.
Yeah.
We're changing all of that now, which is fantastic. But I think the use of media is really exploding. And I think, in large part due to some of the devices we have and the ability for kids to make TikToks. And we've been posting obviously pictures on Instagram for a while now, but you're just seeing just a richer form of communication coming out now of these devices. So I don't know. I think the train has left the depot in terms of the value of media, how it actually gets rolled out and what the form factor is. I think, podcasting and, audio on demand, video on demand is as good an approach as any right now. But, in 15 years, will we all be wearing headsets? Will there be a chip in our arm that's delivering media? I don't know.
It will be the iPhone will be kind of embedded in a kind of plug-in thing on the back of our skull, probably, so we won't have to remember anything. So anyway, we've got one P left, which some may argue is the most important or the most pervasive, I guess, for internal communicators in terms of proving their worth and the worth of whatever they're doing. So do you want to tell us about the final P, Jen?
Yeah. So we used to call it profit. And then we said, well, it's really about performance, profit in the classic sense. Although if you think about ROI, it is sort of about profiting from your energy or your focus, the thing you're spending time and investment on. And I think this one is also the hardest for a lot of organizations to get their arms around, in the sense that we have so much more data now about message consumption than we've ever had in a medium like this, right? You have the information at your fingertips include, here's my message, here's how long it took for me to communicate my message, the length of an episode. Here's how many people actually hit play. Here's how many people stayed with it every 1% of the way.
Mm.
We provide that data. And looking at the slope of that curve tells you a whole lot about how engaging your message is, how engaging your delivery is, how interesting, how well you communicated it, right? How interesting was it, engaging to the audience? So that's an important. I think how do I say this? I think it's important for internal communicators specifically to think about having access to that information and what they would do about it, right? What they would do with it. And we just don't have that in email. We don't have that in print form. We can tell how many people opened something these days, not even with ease. In some cases, we use email clients that auto open things, but we really don't know if you consumed the words, right? I don't know if you read to line 5 or line 50. If I send you a PowerPoint or PDF, I really don't know. And I certainly don't know what part of the presentation caused you to go to sleep or to bail. And that's powerful information as a communicator. We've just never had it before, right? And what do you do with it? I was talking to a huge management consultancy, a big global firm, and they said their managing director wanted to start podcasting. And I said, well, you might want to warn his direct reports that he'll be able to see, if you choose to share the dashboard with him, exactly who is consuming his message and how long. And are they watching it twice? Are they watching it once? Are they, bookmarking something and coming back? And that's all information that's readily available with a media stream, right? I can tell if somebody's, logging in on a Saturday morning and catching up on training content. And I can tell if someone never, ever goes in and listens to a darn thing. And so I wouldn't want to be the SVP working for the managing director who never, ever listened to the podcast that, my boss put out. But
yeah, that's a good point.
Or maybe I would.
Or get my kids to listen to it for me. But
that's right. There you go. Well, of course, that was the joke. Okay. Well, the next innovation is going to be some,
bot.
Some little tool,
right?
Some tool that you embed.
Yeah.
But the truth is, this is information we've never had access to as communicators, and I don't know that we yet know as an industry what to do with it. We look at it. It's important to know how many people press play because that tells us how interested people are in the topic. But, 80% of your audience hit play. Okay, seems like you created a great title. It sounds like this is something people are interested in. But 20% in, everyone's gone. Well, you didn't keep their attention, right? Or you didn't pay off the title. And there are just so many things that you can study and understand with this data. What's the perfect length, right? Is it do most people listen to a 10-minute podcast versus a 50-minute podcast? So slicing and dicing the information this way, looking at it across kind of industries so that we have benchmarks, right? That's something that we are currently in the process of doing. We've got so many clients in so many different industries, so many different sizes with various use cases. We're able to now create benchmarks for what good episode engagement looks like.
Okay.
And are you over-indexing or under-indexing? What is the perfect length for your use case and your type of organization? A pharmaceutical company, with training content. What is the perfect length for you? Well, we can tell you, right? So we're learning a ton just by understanding the use of this medium by the companies that work with us, and then we're also able to inform the individual communicators in these companies through dashboards, et cetera, what's working and what's not. A broad brush, what's working and what's not. But I think we're just at such an early stage of understanding what to do with the data.
Yeah.
It's really fun. It's fascinating.
It is, and I always think, because I think it's the same. It's the as I said before we talked about performance. I think it's one of those things that the internal communicators are always being pushed for. Can you prove value? Can you prove the worth? And I always say, whenever I'm talking to internal communicators about this sort of thing, is that sometimes you just have to rely on a little bit of intuition as well. Is how could our being communicating more in a more accessible way, in a way that's much more organic and easy for people to consume, possibly not be the right thing to do as well. So I think we've got to sometimes take that leap of faith as well. But having the data, I think, is absolutely is great as well. And just one thought for me, and I don't know, Amy, I just sort of this new product development, or how it works in your platform. Do you have any facility. So say I'm listening to an episode, and I think that's a really great point. Is there a sort of a kind of an ability to comment, a bit like, I guess, on YouTube, which always kind of depresses me when reading some of the comments on YouTube videos and the public domain. But is there a way for, if I've listened to my CEO talking about something, to move me to either ask a question or make a comment, or is that something that you don't, you're looking to potentially introduce? I don't know.
It's a configuration that if the company wants that interaction, then they can add that capability. It's a configuration for us. It's not something that's standard. And the reason is most of our organizations are not prepared to receive those comments.
No.
So we have likes, right? We do likes, we do shares, and we track all of that. In certain instances, one company I'm thinking of that's based in Boston, a large management consultancy, it's about 25,000 employees. They've created a Slack channel for each of their shows and hosts. And so they do office hours. And that's one way for them to move it off of the platform. Because what you don't want is a bunch of comments that have to be moderated. This is what happened really with Yammer, right? This is what happened with Facebook Workplace, where you had and have, present tense, the masses of people talking to masses of people. So it's a many-to-many communication environment. And what happens in that type of environment, as you know, it becomes a lot less like Netflix and a lot more like YouTube. And that's, what we've learned is that the Netflix and the Spotify and the Apple, podcast, these curated environments are far more effective, right, for getting in the right information to the right people. Right? If you want to open it up broadly, you certainly can, but now you're scratching a different itch, right? You're not solving the problem of I'm trying to break through all the noise. I'm the head of XYZ team, or I'm part of the internal comms group. Now you're sort of competing with the very loud minority, and we know exactly what they look like, because again, the social media platforms have brought them to light. So it's not something we see a lot of our customers wanting to do. But private commenting, sending feedback to the show host, those are all capabilities and great opportunities. And of course, links in the show notes. A lot of companies will embed surveys in the show notes. And then during the episode, they'll say, hey, don't forget to click on the episode, to click in the show notes. There's a link to a survey, and we'd really like you to fill that out. And of course, the key is to not have that call to action at the bitter end, because nobody stays on for the bitter end. So, there are all sorts of little tricks we've learned where to embed the perfect,
call to action.
Exactly. And I think just to get back to your prior points, I think it's a great one, is how do we know if it works, right? We have to communicate. That's not an option. We have to train, we have to communicate. And so choosing the way that is going to be most preferred, most well-received is a no-brainer, right? We're always looking for that. And of course, I'm about omni communication. So use all the channels at your disposal, just use them the way they're intended to be used. Don't have a 6-page email. Right? That maybe that belongs in a PDF or PowerPoint. Maybe that belongs on a podcast. But I think the other side is, this idea of think, feel, do, right? We communicate for a reason. We want someone to think something or feel something or do something. And starting to measure how well a particular piece of communication causes that think, feel, do reaction, I think is something the industry is ready to do once we can understand the data. Right. Once we can understand the data available. And I think it's exciting. It's the first time we may actually get close to it. There will always be a portion we can't measure perfectly, but we'll be a lot closer to it, I think, now with the data we have, because we can say empirically 80% of the people actually consume this message, or 20% actually got it. And what happened to our productivity, and did our sales go up? And those are really exciting things to be able, as a head of internal comms, actually be able to get in on the data discussion that everybody else has been having fun with right, for the last 15 years.
I know.
So, anyway, there you have it.
That's brilliant. And I mean, it's a really really nice way that you've put that together, and as I said, I can see it in front of me, so I definitely recommend anyone who's listened to the podcast. I'll put the link in the show notes to this resource, and I think it's very visual and it's really easy to follow and beautifully set out. And you've also got some links in there I see too. What's the best microphone to get, which is the sort of 95% of for initial podcasters. What kit do I need is the first thing they jump to, rather than thinking about all the other important stuff that you've outlined in there. So I see you've got that as well. So that's fantastic. So just sort of wrapping up and summarizing what we talked about then, Jen. So any kind of your tips are kind of laid out in your 6 Ps. Any other sort of final sort of above the line sort of tips for anyone who's thinking of starting out with audio podcasting internally that you'd kind of just sort of say, like, here's a couple of golden nuggets for you?
Yeah, I think it's really simple. It's just do it. Just get started. And I think that's a key motivator for companies that are trying something new. Right? Don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to make it perfect out of the gate, and just get going.
Yeah.
Try it and iterate. And there's no question you'll look back at your very first podcast or the first show you did and probably laugh, a year later, because you will have moved so far so fast.
Yeah.
And that's the fun part of this. It's you get started using a new medium and a new tool, and it just takes hold, right? And that's what we see.
Yeah.
With companies that just start doing it. It's so exciting for me when I look at a company, the management consulting firm, for example, that I mentioned, that had 0 podcasts when they started working with us, and they have 27 shows now.
Fantastic.
Right? It's really, and they've just hired a full-time person to come in and work with them to keep this channel updated and strong. And so those are just really fun reflections of what can happen when you actually get going with something that works.
Yeah.
Right.
I would concur, definitely. I mean, I think the anti-Ps, so the 2 Ps that you should avoid, there that you've covered the 6 Ps that you should cover. For me, the 2 Ps that you should definitely avoid from experience are perfection, which you just mentioned, which is aiming for perfection, and I think the 2 are linked together, and the other is procrastination, which is, we'll put it out next month, or maybe let's just wait another month until we've got this. And I learned very well. Thankfully, I was well mentored with my podcast, which is the worst podcast is the one that's just in your head and never been recorded and not out there in the world. So getting started is definitely the kind of key thing. And procrastination and waiting for it to be perfect is not a great strategy. And organizations, sadly, are kind of perfectionists sometimes, and they're just, they're innovating by learning, doing, and getting on with it, and learning through doing it. Sometimes that is not always, kind of encouraged. But I think it definitely should be with podcasting and audio. So. Yeah.
No, I love that. I'm going to use that. I'll quote you.
I'll put a little
the anti-Ps.
Anti-Ps. Yeah, definitely. Well, look, that's perfectionism and procrastination. That's been absolutely fantastic, Jen, and really, lovely to speak. I always think, again, sort of the danger is that I love speaking to people who are kind of passionate about podcasting, because I am as well, and it's kind of the danger of a sort of confirmation bias, but I don't think in any way. I think what you've talked about there is really balanced and objective, but also kind of very helpful and very pragmatic as well. So really grateful. So I know I kind of pre-warned you before we started recording that I always ask my interviewee something that people who maybe work with you or know you well maybe go, oh, I didn't know you did that or have done that, Jen. So I'm going to ask you, what is it something that even people who know you quite well don't know about you, Jen? And you said you might have a few to choose from, so I'll let you pick.
That's right. Well, it's funny. I was thinking about that when you warned me. Yes, thank you. And I thought, gosh, I am such an open book. So I don't know that I can completely adhere to the people, even people who know me well, don't know it. So that was a very good prompt for someone like me. But I will tell you, I am a hot yoga zealot.
Okay.
I love hot yoga.
Right.
So the funny thing is, and that's 107, 110 degrees, 90-minute class. It used to be called Bikram yoga before there was all sorts of controversy with Bikram, and it has been a passion of mine for oh gosh, probably the last 20 years.
Wow.
And I absolutely love it. So the funny thing about being a hot yogi and doing that, if I can, 5 times a week, my employees always say, Jen is going to completely put us in a, what did they say? I have to restate that. They were laughing at me yesterday. Jen is going to completely not freeze you out. What's the opposite? Help.
Yeah.
I keep the thermostat quite high.
Yeah.
Meaning it's very hot in my office.
Right.
So,
okay. Because you're like, you need to keep warm and flexible.
I'm conditioned. I'm just conditioned to being in a hot room. And so the people who come to my office and sit down and have a meeting with me after about an hour, they go, is it hot in here? and I always go, I'm so sorry. So everyone knows that I enjoy hot temperatures and obviously yoga, but again, doing it for so long, I'm so conditioned to the heat that it's terrible. I always say, don't use me as a thermostat. How's everybody else's temperature? And then I just have a sweater or a jacket everywhere I go. But yes, I love hot yoga.
Yeah, you'd hate it where I am at the minute. It's 8 degrees. What's that in Fahrenheit? It's probably about sort of 50,
50s,
yeah, mid 50s. So it's pretty chilly where we are. I guess it's a bit warmer in Austin, Texas at the moment, is it?
It is.
Yeah,
it is. Well, I grew up in New Orleans, and so it's hot and humid in New Orleans.
Yeah,
so I always say, my natural state is to be in a warmer climate.
Yeah.
And of course, Texas is pretty good. Although we had snow this year.
Okay.
We had we called it the snowpocalypse. It was 3 or 4 days of real snow that people could ski on snow.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. So
I had a friend I had a friend from the UK who went to live in Houston, and he just couldn't get used to the humidity in Houston. He said it was just incredibly oppressive at times, but I've never.
It's quite dry here.
Yeah,
for the most part.
We
it's a much drier climate.
Yeah,
it's not Houston or New Orleans.
Yeah.
But I could see that. Yeah, you're not used to it.
Well, look, excellent. So that we know now you're into your yoga, and that's fantastic. I'm the least flexible person. I tried yoga a few times. From years of running and not stretching as much as I should. I'm about as flexible as a sort of a plank of wood. So it's something I keep. My wife does Pilates, and she keeps telling me I must get myself sorted out. So I must.
It's balance. You don't want to be too flexible. So there you go. It's balance.
No. Well,
strength and flexibility.
I think there's definitely I could definitely meet somewhere in the middle. So but look, excellent, Jen. So I'm going to share the link to the 6 P's of podcasting, and I'm also going to share some links to you. So I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile on there. I'm going to share the link to your studio as well, and I'll put the link to your Twitter profile as well on there. So if people want to reach out to you and communicate with you directly, they've got no excuse not to be able to. So is there anything else you'd like us to put into the show notes that you would like to share, or is that, I think that's quite a fair bit there.
I think that's great.
Cool.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure, Jen. I'm really, really grateful for your insights and your time, and I wish you all the best, and hopefully we'll be in touch with you soon, and we can carry on, and maybe we'll have you on again at some point in the future to talk maybe about one of the other channels that you use, maybe video as well, because I think that's another area I'd like to maybe explore at some point as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Craig. I love the conversation, and thank you for having me on the show. It was great.
Pleasure. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So thank you for listening to Engaging Internal Comms. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts about the show and any questions, ideas, or feedback that you'd have. Anything you'd like us to cover on future episodes too, please. So you can email us at info@thebigpicturepeople.co.uk, or you can get in touch with us via the contact form at engagingic.com. You can also sign up to our mailing list there, and we'll send you relevant news about the show and anything that we think you might be interested in when it comes to internal communications and employee engagement. If you like the show and you haven't already done so, please subscribe to it directly via your podcast service. And you can also subscribe via the links on our podcast page, which again is engagingic.com. If you like the show, we'd be really grateful if you could leave us a review, and also if you could leave some verbal feedback there as well, not just stars. That's always nice to know that we've been appreciated, and particularly how we've helped you. If you know anyone else who might like the show or might benefit from it, please tell them, please share it with them. Please share the link to our website, engagingic.com. And that would be great, because we want to grow our community. We want to get as many people involved in the show as possible. And the bigger, the better. Okay, thank you.